film starts with a real story that happened to an Indian young man in a Gulf country, who of course tells it from his point of view. He and the film started at the Saudi Arabian airport with two young men of Indian nationality, and their name is Najib and Hakim, standing in front of the passport officer at the airport and trying to talk to the officer, and they prefer standing around drunk, not knowing, asking men and not acting up to some extent until they meet an Indian worker at the restaurant and get from them the number of the sponsor to sell them and call him from the phone that is at the airport, but it is not a bird. So the worker tells them that the day is Friday, and Friday in Saudi Arabia is a day off, and it is certain that the company number is with the sponsor and two convoys for the vacation. And it is certain that their sponsor Jay is in the railway, and it may be late because of the traffic. So Najib and Hakim, if they understand his words, the house is nervous for them. The person DH and Peter are described to them, and they are described as Jenin, Basib, and Bimshi. But he returns a second time and takes their passports, and then he returns to them a second time and says that they are Hounthium. The two young men who come from India to work for him and take him with him so that they can move in his Arabic and be happy at. Hakim and Najib finally met their sponsor, and her hour, Najib asks the sponsor to hand him a drink. I give him a buzz in Arabic so that he speaks a lot, and Bergi and he and Hakim are asked to he and Hakim are with the bags with their belonging. So Bede Hakim is wise because the Arabic text is transported and it is small, and they almost sit in the exposed part of it. And the company that sold it has what I sold to an Arab margin. Although it is not easy for the Sri Lankans who were with them on the plane, air-conditioned Arab passengers, follow their company. Najib tells him to shut up for a while and get on the plane so that they move, and the sponsor nullifies the zigzag in them. And while they are on the way, they think about the structure of talking to their parents to make sure they have arrived. So after a long time on the road, Hakim slept from fatigue, and an hour later, Najib covers him because it's cold on him. And when I meet them, they arrived in a desert, and the sponsor came down from Arabia and a band on a person. His name is Abu Khalid, and he asks Hakim to come down from Arabic, and he prefers Najib in Arabic as what he is. So between Najib and him, they say that he and Hakim are supposed to sit down only, and they need a phone to talk to their parents. But the sponsor then calls him in Arabic and asks him to come back to Arabic, and what comes down, they understand him, and they tell him, and take Abu Khalid Hakim with him, and lock the door, and Ron and Bacon. Then Hakim is shocked and collapsed, so that he took Najib to his place, and he is to a second place, and they beat the sponsor at the moment Daeshan. He rides the Arabic and keeps quiet, and thanks to a wise man, gives wind to Najib so that he walks and drives him, and then by driving Najib to a second place far away in the desert, with his response in time, the sponsor banned on a person named Jasser and asks him to evacuate Najib until the morning, and then he walks. Najib says at that hour that he understands Jasser that he needs a phone. Bischoff Najib is an old man, and Payne is very tired, and his clothes are cut and worn, and his body is like what Shavish Meh has been for years. And Petvik Najib that he is dressed in his Indian costume, and Basalwa. He is in a phone here, and he is very thirsty and unhappy. He was very thirsty, and suddenly he was fighting because of a camel near him. So he stayed and preferably spit around him. And the old Bessel Hinam Fin, he would say to Lua, he would sleep anywhere, and at her hour, Najib would enter the tent where Jasser slept, and he would throw his cloth on the floor. And by the time he got back to the for the time when Najib was in India, and Bacon was then working as a worker in the coffee shop, and was used to under the water of the day. And her watch was determined by his colleague at work, with a cigarette, and they knew that it was an imported cigarette and came from where. He tells his colleague that it is possible to mortgage the house and the whole sub for 2 months with a travel permit, and he plays with the money. After which he returns all the money that the visa met, and after working with the soul of Najib with his colleague to his sister's husband, and he knows that his name is Karo Fata, and my hand at the time, he lost his visa, and they knew that he had sold all his property and the gold that he had with him. So Krovat says, All the expatriates worked hard at first, and at that time, Bisalwa al-Najib got a call. If the visa is beaten, the house is nervous of him as a cow, and they know that it is yellowish. People of the country in the Gulf, and the rest hope to go to the company that is her wind and return to him a second floss so that they are not confident. Heather sold him Naguib her watch, and they know that he did not mean that he, according to the length and accuracy. Once when her brother Nasser returned from traveling, because there was a lot of camel meat, Mama Najib asked her that she give Najib the number of her sisters Nasser and Hussein because they are violins in Saudi Arabia, and it is possible that he needs them in Mabul. At the same time, Najib returns home and asks his mother to do biryani for him from her hands before he travels, and describes Binu to her pregnancy and back to the present time and her hour. Jasser wakes up from sleep, and Bishof Naji Naim beside him, and he is tired. And the veterinarian of the tent and tells him in Arabic that he never enters his tent again and does not sleep. It's clear that if they heal in his tent, second Hickey breaks his legs and bacon. Then Najib is shocked and does not understand any need from Jasser, and he is standing in the desert, and he describes the forest and his house, and it is clear that if they heal in his tent, the second Hickey breaks his legs, and then Najib is shocked and does not understand any need from Jasser. The desert is not Arif Hinam in the morning. When we wake up, we answer the voice of the goat and the old Peshuf, milking the goat with my hand, milk, so that he would enter it for the sponsor, and forget to answer. I do not speak Arabic, thanks, and hungry, but the old man is crying to him, and they know that the milk is for. By taking the milk from him and drinking it all and saying it in Arabic, he goes to India, which is clear that he is the one who understands his job. But Najib prefers to stand as he is, because he does not understand any need from the one who communicated and tells Jasser that he does not understand. Naguib is afraid and tries to understand him if he finds her here, on the basis that he is working in the company, and Peter helps him to get back to the airport. But Jasser deals with violently, and the veterinarian cleared the tent in the middle of the goat and asks the old man that they teach the job, and at the same time Najib tells him that he wants to call Carrefour for him, that Jay works as a worker in a company, and he has an air-conditioned room for him alone. But the sponsor ignores it because he does not understand it, and asks him in Arabic that he enters the shawls that he brought to the tent in Beirut. Najib to the tent and lands the shawls and bus on Jasser, and the sponsor is very sad, and he thinks about how to let them understand him, and then they look at him with a robe and boots, and in it is written the name of Karuta, his number, and her watch. The sponsor cuts the paper and the passport, the house of Saddam Naguib, a day of work, and the paper film from the ground before what flies and busses on it with oppression and sadness, and by shaking her watch, that the sponsor. Then the sponsor will be able to bake bread live with Jasser and his band on Naguib. But he does not respond to them. And Pet Jab, the living bread is so that he can eat from it. Eggs are thrown to them so that he can live and eat, because he is very hungry, and he grabs the living and eat human. And it is the hour in the east, and he, the old man Tani and Basalwa from the road. Menin Wazai comes out of the desert, and he tells him he is defeated and weak. The road is too far, Basaib and Bimshi. And then Najib sits alone and thinks about his days with Sinha. And they agreed only if she was the daughter of his smook. If Haitham Nabil had been born and was thinking of a violin on a travel day, and his mother, and Sinu would not have been sad, and they would have said goodbye. And his mother was wise to recommend him so that for the first time he would stay away from her, and she would be reassured with him, and they know that he will not pay a penny in the water to use it to clean himself. So he tells Najib that he needs the water to clean himself with it after he has done a bathroom. But Jasser Pete ignores her old watch and tells Najib that he is to clean himself after he mean. She has to use the sand, and then Peggy uses the place, an Indian worker, and we know that he is a worker at the company Al-Meh and Pimlis, Azan al-Jasser Al-Meh, every day. And Najib asks him to watch it, that he takes him with him in Arabic and drives him to the road because he wants to walk from the desert. And Misharif, And at the same moment, Najib grabbed his hands and stopped his friend. The sponsor went crazy, and Bisalwa Azai traded and held his hands to prevent him from hitting him. And Biro answered from the Venetian tent with his belongings to threaten Najib and scare him. So he grabbed a pocket. That time, Najib was lying on the ground and Bella was in a cattle on the sand. At that time, he was swimming in the river, and his moments with Sane, they were swimming only in the river, and they were happy. And he and Sinu thought about the day of his joy, and we know that they were living a love story together. And when bivouac, Najib from his memories preferred to give a very sad and bond on a tray with a loud voice. And at night, the old Bischoff, while he was tending the camel and Piakloa, he remained in peace and stayed for a whole year. Here, and the old man is working on him with a song and 2 pipes on him, and he goes crazy and is not in a stable psychological state. And the next day in the morning, Biz Jasser is crying to Najib because it's not easy to sleep. So we answer them with a grumpy answer and B-Tech that Jasser is milking the goat. And honestly, because what he knows, milking the goat, but he has to carry out Jasser's words, and B tries to milk the goat, but the moment and at that time, Bisalwa Najib answered the old person because he disappeared, and there is no discussion left. So the ignorant house dared and did not bird on and tried to understand him that he has a second job, his job, so that he would have to milk the goat quickly, and whoever beat him and punish him. So Najib was afraid and had to flee. He tries to try milking the goat again, and after roasting 2 sheep between each other, he tries to intervene to guide them. But at that time he tries to interfere, and when his head is pulled out of the pen, the sheep thinks that he is being beaten, and he smashes into his rice and spots on the ground and pim on him. And at the same time, and when he drinks a small met trumpet, and he sings that the sheep and sheep walked, and he asks him to collect them from the second WA, who are free of mat all day long, people of Najib, who is not able to move at the same moment. At that moment, the mercy of our Lord descended on him, and he was filled with joy, and they hugged him as he collapsed. And after days, months, and years, Najib and his form changed completely, and by chance he whispered to himself in an Arabic mirror, and his form was wiped out by a thick beard. What is about to happen is that BJ, the sponsor at the time, broke the mirror so that Najib would spit in it and Peter would spit on him. And if he thought himself handsome, then Najib took a pair of broken mirrors and tried to cut his beard with it and feeling her. And he feels that the world has wronged him and was unfair to him, and he commits suicide. But at that time, he is a coward, and they are eating the flesh of a dead corpse. And when he gets close to it, he knows that it is the corpse of the old man, between him more, and he fights the hawks to keep them away from the corpse. And at the same time, he runs into the desert, and at the same moment, Debichavoy, the sponsor, the Gri, Ra, and the camel rider beat him and shot him in the leg. And when he gets down from the camel, he beats him violently, and he looks with his legs at the hands of a man, Naguib, Peshtam, Behinwa, and they say that he is a dog. And at night, Ben Shuf Naguib, he is tied up in the middle of goats and sheep. But he can free himself, and he tries to walk, but he can't walk, and he gets tired. He's very tormented because of the pain that he feels. And it's raining, so I hide the sheep under the rocks to some extent. The rain stands up and they have a small bite to eat together, even with my hand to the sheep, so that he eats it together. Although the bite is very small, and dub it's enough, but Mahanj Ali shows the sheep hungry, and it's time, by hearing the voice of a second sheep, Jay from afar. Beirut shows the voice to Jay Menin, and make peace with his feet, and as much as he knows from his voice and him, because the wise form remains strange, is a violin, his hair, and a long chime like Naguib, and tells Najib that they should escape, except for me. But Naguib Bacon is desperate, and they know that he fear. But at that time Peggy, the sponsor, Phipps, began to answer in his place, so that they would show him, and he would take the letter, and I would say that to some extent, Beamshi and Piro would take the letter after that, and Bakra and Bacon, a wise writer for him, in which his sponsor beat him severely, so that he would speak to him and tell him about an African man who worked with him. His name is Ibrahim, and he can help them escape. But Najib and he feel hope from the second, And then Najib meets Hakim and be with him, Ibrahim, who welcomes him. They recognize himself and say that after how many days is enough for them, his daughter is allowed, and her hour. Everyone will be present at a wedding party. And he sings, in the spirit of the sponsor at that time, let Najib and my hand have meat for him to eat. And the first thing that dawns is to walk the gasser, so that he goes to the wedding, and Najib arrives on the sheep, because he does not return. The second is not to hate the morning, and why he walks. Jasir Biro Najib opens the MIH and drinks and holds and gives her watch, because he had forgotten the feeling of MIH touching his body and taking off the demolition that he was wearing, so that he would wear the demolition that Jay was wearing. But he meets her with a very wide cut on him, and tries to watch her meet any threads that bind the pants on his waist. And by taking his bag and walking with Hakim Ibrahim, and when the night is over for them, Hakim is very tired and thirsty, so Ibrahim tells him that he prefers with Najib, and he is trying to act and sneak into any tent, from which Maya answers. But then the friends, he, Najib, Hakim and Ibrahim are not cattle in the desert, and they can't eat or drink together. And the sun is very hot, and the air is hot, and we don't call it air. And at that hour, Hakim besal Ibrahim, if they are cattle in the right direction, they sold, that they should prefer cattle in the direction of the sun, and suddenly they are. And his form is terrifying and scary, because his body seemed to decompose. And at that time he was very wise, and he felt that their fate was to be like a camel because of heat and thirst. And then he put the three of them with sand and stood up to reach a group. Suddenly they discovered Jared. They are in a snake den, between Ibrahim Hakim's projectile and Najib's request. He prefers stationary and moving so that the snake feels, pinches and grills him. Najib is tired, rigid, and his belly swells because of the intense heat. Because he walks barefoot from then on, Ibrahim gave him his legs by wearing clothes to protect his legs from the heat of the sand. He walks. And while I suggested to him that they run away and know that their life among the sheep was the kindest in which they are. So Abraham stood at the time and prayed, and preferred to chant praises and prayers along their way. And since Abraham intended Bekshri, the body is stronger than Hakim and Najib, he is able to care about them, because of what they fell, and the wise man along the way. And suddenly after they are on the way, the wise man gets fantasies, and the bishop of the sand, Miesh, Pimsk, Baikel, Meshhasis and Biz, which limit he tries to prevent. And he falls on the ground afterwards, and bins in the blood of those who stayed, and Pinar Najib hour out of fear for him. And Peter Ibrahim helps him, but Ibrahim Bacon knows that the Najib and suddenly Petji have a sandstorm on them. And Bacon Najib refuses to walk and wash the body of a wise man. So the eggs of Tar Ibrahim, that he paralyzes him in order to keep him away from the storm. But unfortunately the storm reaches them, and why? When the storm calmed down and got rid of the favor, Najib collapsed because of what happened to Hakim. And then Yas and Mashais moved from his place, and Beban was very depressed. But then Ibrahim got up in anger about him and knew that they had to complete the road. And then he mutilated Ibrahim and what he could trample on his legs. And then Ibrahim discovered that two men Najib devoured, and Ibrahim Najib prevents that. He attacks the water and drinks from it many times once, and they drink point by point until his body is ready. He drinks a second natural refinal. And then they two cattle showed a sheet of biscuits on the ground, and the tracks of the Arab calf. And they were very happy at that time, because it meant that they were close to the road. So they walked in the same way as the tracks of the calf. And it is true why they met in the end. The road appeared and they felt. Ibrahim gave up and decided to commit suicide. Salvation. And then Najib continues his way and drinks the last of his love in the Aza and eat the date with him. He does not know heck how much the rest of his way is, and suddenly he is walking. Bilucky himself arrived for the road. But what he had a hunch is that he would stand up to help him, because everyone is afraid of his form, and it is better at once all night and the next day in the morning. Our Lord makes fun of us to answer a kind person, God bless him, and stand up in his Arabic, the first thing he shows, and they help him. But Najib be afraid and terrified of him at first. So the one who arrived to the situation and then drove to the city in Bacon. Najib did not believe that in his own way and thanked the good person. Duobei and Beifal, Najib walks through the streets to a total of Indians, Bishofu and Pyakdo, and with the help of one of them, he delivers to his parents and talks to them. And the first thing he hears is their voice, Benhar from the clinic. Especially he hears the voice of his little son, and we know from his times that she named him Nabil Zeed. What they agreed after was the spirit of Najib to the police station, so that he can suddenly Bischoff photographed Ibrahim related to among the missing, and Bischoff Najib then standing with all those arrested on charges of escaping from their sponsors. And Bischoff Najib is very afraid, because Bischoff is enough to beat one of them. At the moment, Najib discovers that the person in question was not the real sponsor, and that he stole from him from the airport, and understood that he was his sponsor, and took advantage of his lack of understanding of the language, and that what he had guessed was to help him so that they did not understand. And then, we know that Najib served 3 months in prison until in the middle of many travelers with bags full of electronic devices and televisions. We could not answer with anything other than the rest of his age and health.
Subscribe and activate the bell.